In this video lecture, we're going to discuss formal letters. We're going to look at particularly a skeleton for a formal letter, talk about how you can use Microsoft Word to set up this skeleton, and how you can fill it out to make your own letter look professional and rhetorically appropriate. Let's begin. We've got a page set up here on Microsoft Word. In particular, we've got 1-inch margins all the way around already set up, and I've made two styles. Up at the top, I've made a thing called letter body style and letter not body style. Letter body style is much the same as normal. The thing is, I've set up letter body to be 10 points between each paragraph. So every time I hit the enter key, there'll be a 10-point space between the paragraphs. Letter not body, on the other hand, I've deleted that space. So it'll be same leading as everything else. Same. As a matter of fact, just absolutely the same. The only difference is that there is not any space between the paragraphs. So every time I hit enter, it'll go directly to the next physical line. Let's see how this works. The first thing I'm going to put in is who I am. This is my organization I'm writing from, and here's my address. This is called the return address. You want to include this so that your recipient knows how to contact you. This is the traditional spot to put it. Now please note that I did not put my individual name up top. You can include it, you don't have to include it. Generally speaking, you don't include it, but it is possible to do so. It's not wrong. If you're using letterhead though, for example, let's say that the Arturian Order of Knights of Pendragon has something already printed up and they just have to stuff it in their printer, and they've already got a logo, they've got their address, everything like that, then you don't need to include all this information. The next thing we'll include, we've skipped a couple of lines and put in our date. Please notice I've written out my month name. The next thing I'll do is skip a couple of lines and start my inside address. The inside address is the person to whom I am writing. In this particular case, I'm writing to Joe McCarthy. If Joe has a job title, I'm going to put it there as well. The next thing I'll include is where does Joe work? He works at Larry's Discount Law. Where is Larry's Discount Law located? How can I get in contact with Larry's Discount Law? Where am I sending this letter? That's what I'll include right here. If Larry only works by email, he doesn't have a physical address, then I would just include an email address. Next, I skipped the same amount of lines that I had between the return address and the date and the inside address, and then I've got my re line. The re line works just the same as a re line in a memo. It works much the same as a subject line in an email. Discuss what is this thing that you're writing about and move on from there. Again, make sure, please note as you look at this, make sure it's not too long, but it's very informative. The next thing we include is a couple of spaces and the salutation. We're going to talk about the salutation and break it down a little bit. To begin, the word dear. This is the way that we do it in America. Dear so-and-so. Please notice we have an honorific, Mr. in this case. Writing to men is often very simple because we just say Mr. blank. What if you're writing to women though? It's a little more complex. If you're writing to a very young woman, it's okay to say Miss, but you would not say, to example, to a 4-year-old, dear Mrs. Well, of course not, she's not married. But what if you're writing to an older woman, not necessarily old, but older, and you say, dear Mrs. so-and-so? What if she's not married? Would she take offense? Quite possibly. A good compromise is to use the word Ms. M-S, period. One word that may seem innocuous at the top is madam. Dear madam. Well, it's kind of an old-fashioned thing to say, certainly, but also madam has a second meaning. It implies that a woman provides certain services. If you don't know beyond what I'm talking about, I encourage you to look up the word and see the connotation. In any case, we will continue. In the line here, please notice that I didn't include Joe's full name. I didn't say, Dear Joseph McCarthy. Why is that? It's because it sounds like it would be written by a computer. You say, Dear Mr. McCarthy. This sounds less like it's a form letter. Also, we've got a colon at the end. You're probably used to writing letters and putting in commas. Dear Mom, comma. That's fine for a friendly letter. but for a formal letter like this, you want to end with a colon. At this point, please notice I've switched styles. I've gone to letter body style, so everything from here onward is going to be using the letter body style. So we've got our first thing is our intro paragraph. What's included in the intro paragraph? We want to explain who you are, why are you writing, what are you writing about, and what's the context of your writing. Give the reader something to hang on to here. When you're doing this, please remember, no more than 4 physical lines should go in this paragraph. If you do more than 4 physical lines, your reader will probably lose interest and or not be able to get through it. The narration paragraph. The narration paragraph, it tells the story. Describe what are you writing about and why are you writing. You probably already mentioned these ideas in the intro paragraph, but this is the place where you can flesh them out. Now you can use more than one paragraph as necessary, but generally speaking, as for business type correspondence, you want to keep it relatively short. The petition paragraph. This is the paragraph where you make your request. Tell the reader, what do you want? Do you want something from your reader? Do you want to do something for your reader? Be very specific what it is. The justification paragraph. In this paragraph, you're going to explain and expand on why is the petition good. If it's good for the reader, what is the reader going to get out of it? How will the reader benefit? Remember, that's the you attitude. Focus on your reader. The action conclusion. This is where we're going to get into recapping the contents. So, what came before? If it's a long letter, feel free to recap the contents. If it's a very short letter, there's probably not a need to. In any case, what you need to do is put the action in the conclusion. Restate the petition somehow. Be polite when you do so, but also be firm. No one will do what you want if you're wishy-washy. If it's necessary to hear back from your recipient, request a reply. It's also often a good idea to include some contact information or at least specify what mode of contact you would prefer. The next element up is what we call our complimentary close. In this case, I put sincerely. It's a very common way that we're going to end business type letters in America because it's saying, hi there, I'm being friendly, I like you, but I'm not being gushy. I'm not saying love. I'm also rhetorically appropriate because for most audiences, sincerely will work. If I wrote, for example, yours in Christ, that might be very appropriate for a Christian audience, but not for any other audience. As an etymological note, you may be interested to find this out. The word sincerely. It's broken up into sin, which is Latin. It's very similar to the word sans. It means without. Then we've got sere. Sere is wax, so our letter is without wax. Well, that's very nice, but why do we care about this? The reason is this. Back in the day, metal bowls were very expensive. Glass bowls were incredibly expensive. People kept things in pottery. Roman potters would go, make their pots, put them in the kiln, fire them, and then paint them. As anyone who's ever done pottery will find out, or tell you, is that sometimes the pots will explode in the kiln, or sometimes they'll just crack. If they crack, well, sometimes the less honest, we'll call them, Roman potters would take wax, stuff wax in the cracks, and then paint over them so they couldn't be seen. The Romans would come then, buy a pot, take it home, fill it with water, it'd work for a while, then suddenly one day, pop, squirting water, they've bought a dribble pot, they're unhappy. What we're saying here is, our letter has no wax, it has no filler, it will hold water. After sincerely, we're going to skip 4 lines and then put in a typed signature. We want to skip 4 lines because that's the standard amount of space that is necessary to put a scribbled signature in ink. Please note, if you use less than 4 physical lines, it's more likely that the signature will cover up part of the letter and it'll be distracting. If it's bigger than 4 lines, then the signature will often be lost in a sea of white and look silly. 4 lines is a good amount of space. The next thing we want to put in is the person who is writing, what is their job title? Do they have a, for example, are they representative of something? In this case, Dave Mustaine is the Grand Exalted Poobah. A title of some sort tells the reader who you are. It's also a good idea to put in some contact information here. Now please note, we've got give your contact information in the action conclusion already. And we've got contact information down here. Is that redundant? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. A little redundancy never killed anybody, but at the same time, don't include too much of the same stuff. The final, or almost final thing we're going to put in, the typist's initials, of course, and our enclosures line. Please note, if there are no enclosures, if it's just a letter by itself, you don't need to include the word enclosures. Just leave it off. On the other hand, if you have one enclosure, say enclosure, enclosures, plural, that's fine. If you want to list what they are, go ahead, put colon, name what those things are. If you don't want to, and just say that they are attached, that'll be fine as well. Let's zoom out and take a quick overview of what we've talked about so far. We've got our return address, blank space, our date line, blank space, the inside address, blank space, an optional reline, blank space, a salutation, an introductory paragraph, a narration paragraph, a petition paragraph, a justification paragraph, and an action conclusion paragraph. We also have a complementary close, 4 blank lines, the author's name, the author's title, the author's contact information, a little bit of space, typist's initials, and an enclosure line. That concludes this video lecture.